Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. And if you're new here, welcome for the first time. And tonight we're going to count down my 10 most disturbing books of all time. So stay tuned. Okay everyone, before we do this disturbing thing, I just want to talk about last night very quickly, where I did an awesome live with one of my favorite authors of all time, Chad Lutsky. And I'm going to link that live down below. And yeah, I just want to say, when we communicated with each other via email, we agreed that it was going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which happens to be 9 p.m. South African time. And guess what? I made my show 8 p.m. So I was there early, and so I spent an hour talking with people that joined with me. I'm so glad a lot of you stayed. You asked me questions. We had a lot of fun. So if you really want to watch that live, and it's pretty awesome when Chad joins, yeah, of course you don't have to skip me, of course, right? You can watch all of that as well, but you just have to go skip an hour, and then you're going to see Chad, and he had a lot of very interesting things to say. So yeah, check it out below. Okay everyone, so what does it mean for a book to be disturbing? Now I think this is highly subjective. Let's say for instance someone who does not read horror, who does not like scary things, who doesn't read horror at all, might find some middle grade book, like scary stories to tell in the dark, even though it's for children. They might find that kind of disturbing, because that's them. It's subjective. It's about the person. And us as horror readers, I think it's just books that hit a nerve, and could be trigger warnings, or just books that kind of hit you on a psychological, even spiritual, mental kind of level, and it leaves a lasting impression. And yeah, it can make you feel very vulnerable and sad. It can traumatize you, and it doesn't have to be the whole book. Of course, it could be just part of a book, a couple of scenes that really hit you, and they knock you for a six. And so yeah, these are books that hit a nerve with me, and they're not necessarily bloody or disgusting or kind of extreme, because I don't normally have too much of a problem with that. But it might be also something that's got a kind of taboo subject matter, and it's something that just made me feel kind of spiritually or emotionally disturbed by what was written. So yeah, let's carry on. Okay, let's start with some short story special mentions, just a couple of them. I'm not going to talk about them too much, but you should read these. And my wife has gone out to quiet the fornicating frogs, because they're a pain in the arse right now. So it's obviously mating season. But let's get going with this. First of all, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, where AI computer, supercomputer, destroys the world and hates mankind. But he keeps, I think it's 5 people alive to torture over and over again. And what makes the story super disturbing is the ending. Yeah, it'll kick you in the guts, make you fall over, it might make you like convulse a little bit. It is terrifying and disturbing, and you will think about it for quite a while afterwards. And then we got Survivor Type by Stephen King. Yeah, so you got a surgeon who's smuggling heroin. He's not a very nice guy, but the ship sinks and he gets kind of stranded on a deserted island besides this annoying bird. And all he's got with him is his surgeon equipment, kind of in a bag, lots of heroin, and he's determined to survive. Yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this, but yeah, it's truly nasty. Some people say it's the most disturbing thing that Stephen King has ever written. I'm not going to argue with that. Yeah, and it would help if you're sympathetic with him, but you're not. But yeah. And finally, also by Stephen King, we have The Jaunt, where now you can travel from Earth to Mars on a jaunt, and a family decides to travel. It's a lovely family story, except that when you travel, it's kind of across space and time, you have to be put to sleep. And I'm not going to say anything more there. Those that have read the story know. But there's one particular scene, and just the visual of the scene and the thought of it is just, yeah, highly, superly disturbing. Okay, let's get to the ranking. In number 10, I had to include one Stephen King, and I was going to include Pet Sematary by Stephen King, which would probably be an obvious choice for most people, but I'm not a parent. I don't have a child, so I think if I did have a child, it would probably affect me a great deal more. I'm going to go with a book that I have not read in forever, but just the thought of it traumatizes me and hits me on a level, kind of scars me, makes me curl in a ball and cry. And that is The Long Walk by Stephen King. And now, yeah, this is about a horrifying, nightmarish, dystopian future where there's a competition every year where these 16-year-olds have to go on this long walk, this march competition. And there's the last man standing who will win everything that they ever want for the rest of their lives. And basically these boys set out on this march, and they've got to maintain 4 miles per hour, and they can't do anything to each other. There are rules, obviously, but if they drop below 4 miles per hour, they get a warning shot, and if they break the rules 3 times, they get 3 warning shots, and then the 4th time they're out of the game completely, permanently, until the last man standing, no finish line. And this book for me is just horrifying and disturbing on so many levels, but just physically it makes me want to put my mouth, curl up in a ball and cry for these kids, and just cry for humanity, and just think like it's the most horrifying thing that I can think of, really, to be honest. Okay, in 9th position we got Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. This might be high up on some people's lists, but it wasn't that disturbing for me on many levels, but on one level it was super disturbing. And it's about a woman who's obsessed with a serial killer, and she goes on a quest for him to retrieve this key in a chest in his cabin in the woods and take it to this mysterious riverman. And she happens to take her invalid sister with her. And yeah, she's not a nice character, and it's not so much, look, I love the story, as far as I'm concerned, it's beautifully written, beautiful imagery, and I didn't have a problem with the gore and the violence and everything else. What is disturbing for me is the backstory of Laurie and sister and just her family life, what Laurie is, and there's a particular taboo in there that is kind of difficult to stomach, and that made me feel kind of sick and disturbed. And I can't really say anything more. I don't want to give anything away. But if you want to read the story, you need to check your trigger warnings, because it's a family thing and it's dark and it's super disgusting, super disturbing. Okay, in 8th position we have We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. One of the first books I reviewed on my channel, I think in January 2023. And this is a very difficult book to get through, people. The subject matter of a school shooting, and yeah, he basically kills, murders 7 of his fellow high school students, a cafeteria worker and a teacher who tried to befriend him. And yeah, you kind of, it's all through the mother, and she tells the tale. And she's not trustworthy, she's not likable, but yeah, you get to know this character Kevin. And look, I think the reason this is disturbing for me, I'm an ex-teacher, and I've dealt with a lot of difficult kids, boys and girls, and yeah, obviously nothing like this, but I did deal with a lot of troubled kids in my time, and so this book really hit a nerve with me. And even though the school shooting is awful, what comes after and just, yeah, you need to read this book. But it is a difficult read. And I found it disturbing. I found it distressing more than anything, as an ex-teacher. So that is, we need to talk about Kevin. Okay, the 7th book is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Casey. I did a review very recently, so I'm not going to talk too much about this book. But it is about mental health. It's about a mental institution in the 60s. And yeah, this authoritarian, very cruel nurse who rules with an iron fist over this ward and his patients. And she's not worried about getting them better. She just wants them to conform. So it's a whole thing about society and conformity and the individual trying to break free. And he's represented by this new inmate. And yeah, I found this a very powerful read. But for me it was psychologically disturbing, because I do have issues. And some of the stuff that I read in this book kind of, yeah, hits a nerve a little bit. It's this giant, half Native American, and he's kind of schizophrenic. And the story is told from his point of view. And I just found a little bit of it hit close to home, I'm being honest here. So yeah, I'm going to say this was a disturbing book for me, but it's still very powerful. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Okay, the 6th book is Offseason by Jack Ketchum. Now, yeah, I said as a horror reader, I'm not particularly turned off by brutality and kind of bad violence and cannibalism and stuff like that. And this is what this novel is all about. Some inbred violent cannibals and some out-of-towners who are kind of camping. And they clash heads, or whatever. But the story is intensely brutal. It's carnage. The reason it disturbed me is because it is so visceral. It is so well written. And I had dreams. And I still think about this one scene, this person in this cave, and so it had a profound impact on me. It pulled the trigger, bones breaking and thing, but just the sheer brutality of it, beyond anything I've ever read. There's maybe one more book on the list that is kind of similar, even worse, but we're going to get to that. So yeah, this book did get me. I remember my wife saying that night, stop pinching me, or stop. I was kind of moving in my sleep. I was disturbed. And this is a disturbing book, people. So if I ever read The Girl Next Door, yeah, please think about me. But that is Offseason by Jack Ketchum. Okay, next up we've got a book that seriously chilled me to the bone. That is Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. I hope I've said that properly. But this is, yeah, terrifying, dystopian future where animal meat is this virus. It's no longer healthy to eat. What's fatal to humans. So there's kind of a change in the system, a change in the order, and yeah, now humans are eating humans, but they're called heads. And it's kind of become normalized. And it's one of the most terrifying things about this book for me, and it's chilling, is how so many people in the society have accepted the new reality. And it's just everything in terms of the meat processing plants is described in detail, gruesome. It is not for the faint of heart, people. This book is gruesome. And yeah, it's one man who's struggling a little bit because he's given the gift of this head girl, and he can do whatever he wants with her. And yeah, he's kind of in a, whereas everyone else accepts, he's kind of in a little bit of a moral dilemma. What should I do here? Now, all I can say is, yeah, this novel chilled me to the bone. I get very disturbed by these kind of dystopian futures because you never know what's going to happen on our Earth, on our planet. And I have to say, one of the scenes, it's not really a spoiler, and it's not the most graphic scene. said, this is not for the faint of heart, but the one scene that I still think about. And I'm going to say it. Don't want to skip a minute, but it's part of the book, but it's not a spoiler. This girl's head, basically it's just like with cattle and animals and so on, they breed them. And yeah, she's brought out for tasting. For this person who's kind of moving around. It takes out a knife and slices off some meat. Tasting. Oh, yeah. It's a heartbreaking book, it's a disturbing book, and it's not for everyone. And the fornicating frogs are back, and they agree with me. This is not for everyone. Okay, this next book, in fourth position, some people might not label it disturbing. They might label it more incredibly bleak and sad. And that is A Road by Cormac McCarthy. And I found this particular book disturbing because it made me want to cry for humanity. It touched a part in my soul, my spirit, that just cry out for humanity. Yeah, and it's about a man and a boy, and they are in a burnt out America, traveling across to try to get to the coast. They don't even know what's there. And yeah, they've got very little to protect themselves. It's just a very bleak thing, of kind of very bleak view of humanity in a post-apocalyptic world. And there's a little bit of light, the relationship between the man and the boy. I said in my review of this book, it's like a candle, or it's like a lighter, and you light. There's a little flame in the darkness, but at any time it can go out. And it just made me shiver, and it made me feel very vulnerable and very sad for humanity. Yeah. So that is a very powerful book, and that is A Road. Okay, next up in third position we got The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. Now, I just want to read something very quickly from the back cover, because we're inside this guy's head. Okay? 2 years after I killed Blythe, I murdered my young brother Paul for quite different reasons and more fundamental reasons. Then I disposed of Blythe. And then a year after that, I did for my young cousin Esmeralda, more or less on a whim. That's my score to date. 3. I haven't killed anybody for years and don't intend to ever again. It was just a stage I was going through. Okay, but that's not the most disturbing part of this book. By the way, 16. And yeah, his behavior in this book, the reason this book is so terribly and utterly disturbing and fascinating at the same time, because the psychological kind of thing about being in this guy's head is, I'm not going to tell you what the story is about, it's too complex. I have mentioned it in another video. But the animal violence and the torture in this book, if you have any triggers at all, and I am a little triggered by this, I don't know how I read this book. I don't know how I read this book. But the cruelty to animals, and not really a spoiler, I'm just going to say babies. But it's a very cruel, kind of vicious book in many ways. But it's also a fascinating psychological profile of Frank, his father on this island. The twist ending, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to tell you about the story. But yeah, I found it deeply disturbing. And if you do not like harm to animals, people, if you've got even a tiny trigger, don't read this book, The Wasp Factory. Okay, everyone, in second position, and I kind of cheated. I'm going for a short story collection, but just have to add this here, and that is Clive Barker's Books of Blood. Now, not all of them are disturbing. They're all horrifying. They're all very, very dark, full of grotesque monsters, and very bloody and depraved, but also very, very inventive, kind of ahead of its time, and just brilliant. But there are some stories in here, quite a few stories in here, that might push some buttons, so be warned. And all I can say is my favourites were Dread, and I think The Life of Death. Of course, then you've got The Midnight Meat Train, which is taking serial killer kind of body horror slasher stuff to an absolutely another level, and I loved it. And there's a movie on it as well. But yeah, I highly recommend this. I'm sure you'll find something in here to disturb you. Yeah, hit the chord for sure. And I'm going to put at the end of my video, I'm going to put, because I did 2 videos, my top 10 from Books of Blood 1 to 3 and 4 to 6. So watch that and get an idea of some of the stories in this book. Okay everyone, in first position we have The Black Farm by Elias Witherow. And just like I said with the Off-Season, I'm not normally squeamish when it comes to blood and violence and gore, but this book is different. And yeah, it's about a couple, and they're going through hard times. They've had all sorts of difficulties. Now they've lost their child, so they decide that they're going to kill themselves to find peace and quiet, and go to heaven, possibly. And so that's what they do. And then they find themselves in the Black Farm, which is kind of like a purgatory, hell place, where, yeah, it's not about watching your trigger warnings. There's about every trigger warning in this book, and it's just so bleak, it's so dark, so depressing, it's so disturbing. And some of the world building, and this at the Black Farm is like this island, and there's these creatures patrolling the island. It's probably for me the most disturbing part of the whole thing. I'm not going to go into spoilers, but what they do, people trying to escape the Black Farm, because yeah, it's just a depraved novel, absolutely depraved, and I dream about it still. I gave it 4 stars because I didn't think there were some parts of it that go over gel for me, but it is so freaking disturbing, and I do not advise you to read it if you are worried about certain things. It is a nightmarish world, people, and just on an existential level, like heaven and hell, and who am I, seeing what happens to these people on this island was just, yeah, made me shiver. And still, just thinking about it makes me kind of, yeah, kind of sad inside. Wants to shake on the ground. It's just life and death. It makes you think about that and the afterlife and what's out there, what's happening. Yeah, it is truly horrific. So if you can stomach it, you like extreme horror novels, and you want to go into a world that's incredibly, it's just very visual, it's very imaginative, incredibly imaginative, but so dark and distressing. It distressed me. So yeah, I'm going to stop there. So those are my top 10 disturbing novels of all time. Okay everyone, so that's my list for tonight. Let me know what your favorite, most disturbing books are of all time. Let me know what you think of these books. Have you read them? Do you find them light reading? Or do you find them equally as disturbing? Yeah, I'd love to hear from you and have a conversation with you down in the dark spaces below. And yeah, until next time, take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.